I'm sure you've heard the news. Nestled in Eastern Europe, Ukraine is a country with a history as rich and fertile as its soil. The breadbasket of Europe nickname isn't just for show. The black soil here is legendary. Throughout history, everyone from empires to empires in disguise wanted a piece of Ukraine. The Mongols, the Ottomans, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, you name it, they probably had a go at ruling over this land. This tumultuous past has shaped Ukraine's identity, creating a people known for their resilience and love of freedom. What's something people don't know about Ukraine between 1945 and 1950? World War II left scars on every corner of the world, and Ukraine was no exception. Caught between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, the country became a brutal battleground. When the dust settled, Ukraine found itself under Soviet control as the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The decades that followed were marked by a mix of progress and oppression, with rapid industrialization transforming Ukraine into a major industrial power. But forced collectivization led to the Holodomor, a man-made famine in the 1930s that killed millions of Ukrainians. What's something people don't know about life in Soviet Ukraine during the 1950s and 1960s? For ordinary Ukrainians, life under Soviet rule was a mixed bag. Imagine living in a world where your job, your apartment, even your vacation destination were assigned to you by the state. Censorship was rampant, with the government controlling all forms of media and expression. Despite the hardships, Ukrainians found ways to thrive, finding joy in simple things like a shared meal or a night out at the theater. Beneath the surface of conformity, a quiet resistance was brewing, a yearning for freedom and self-determination. I don't think people understand how resilient Ukrainian culture was during the 1960s and 1970s. From embroidered shirts to soulful folk songs, Ukrainians found subtle ways to express their national identity. Underground literary circles flourished, sharing banned books and poems that whispered of freedom and independence. This cultural resistance was a testament to the enduring spirit of the Ukrainian people, their refusal to let their identity be erased. The Soviet Union projected an image of unity and prosperity, but the reality was far more complex. Economic stagnation, environmental disasters, and a growing awareness of Western freedoms contributed to disillusionment. Dissident movements began to emerge, demanding greater autonomy and respect for human rights. These brave individuals risked imprisonment, exile, and even their lives to speak truth to power. They were the cracks in the Soviet facade, small but impossible to ignore. The year was 1986, and in the early hours of April 26, the world witnessed the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. A routine safety test gone horribly wrong led to an explosion that spewed radioactive material into the atmosphere. The nearby city of Pripyat was evacuated overnight, becoming a ghost town frozen in time. The Soviet response? Initially denial and secrecy, but the truth, much like radiation, has a way of getting out. What's something people don't know about the Chernobyl disaster? The immediate impact was devastating, but the long-term consequences were even more insidious. Radiation seeped into the environment, contaminating water, soil, and food. The true cost of Chernobyl, both in terms of human life and environmental damage, may never be fully known. Amidst the tragedy, there were also stories of immense courage and resilience, with firefighters and liquidators risking their lives to limit the spread of radiation. What are your thoughts on the long-term impacts of the Chernobyl disaster? Share in the comments below. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union was starting to unravel. Years of economic stagnation, political repression, and disastrous policies had taken their toll. Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika were valiant efforts but ultimately futile. Across the Soviet republics, the winds of change were blowing strong, with one republic after another declaring independence. For Ukraine, the Chernobyl disaster had exposed the cracks in the Soviet system, fueling a growing sense of national identity and a desire to break free from Moscow's control. I don't think people understand the challenges Ukraine faced after declaring its independence on August 24, 1991. Over 90% of Ukrainians voted overwhelmingly in favor of independence in a referendum held in December 1991. The transition wasn't easy, with Ukraine inheriting a struggling economy, a vast nuclear arsenal, and a political system in dire need of reform. Leonid Kravchuk became the first president of independent Ukraine, navigating the country through these turbulent times. The nation was ready to take its place on the world stage as a sovereign and independent nation. You need to hear this if you're a young Ukrainian in the early 2000s. The early years of Ukrainian independence were marked by hope, uncertainty, and growing pains. The transition from a centrally planned economy to a market-oriented one proved painful for many, with inflation soaring and industries struggling to adapt. Corruption infiltrated every level of government and society, but Ukraine pressed on with reforms, adopting a new constitution, embracing democratic principles. On the international stage, Ukraine navigated a delicate balancing act between its historical ties to Russia and its aspirations for closer integration with Europe. A new generation of Ukrainians was coming of age, eager to shape their own destiny and build a better future for their country. I don't think people understand the depth of corruption and political games in Ukraine during 2005 to 2010. As the new millennium dawned, Ukraine grappled with familiar demons: corruption, political infighting, and the shadow of its larger neighbor to the east. Despite some economic growth and a budding civil society, Ukraine's political landscape remained a tangled web of oligarchic influence and backroom deals. The 1990s saw a revolving door of prime ministers and presidents, each promising reform but often falling prey to the same old temptations of power. The dream of a truly democratic and prosperous Ukraine felt, at times, as elusive as ever. What's something people don't know about the 2004 Ukrainian presidential election? Viktor Yanukovych, the Kremlin-backed candidate, faced Viktor Yushchenko, a pro-Western reformer. The election was rigged, leading to mass protests across the country. This was the Orange Revolution, a testament to the power of peaceful protest and the unwavering spirit of the Ukrainian people. A new election was held, and Yushchenko emerged victorious, showing the world that Ukrainians were willing to fight for their freedom. What's something people don't know about the pivotal years of 2013 to 2014 in Ukraine? The Orange Revolution solidified Ukraine's desire for closer ties with the West, but it also deepened the divide within Ukrainian society, between those who yearned for Europe and those who felt a cultural connection to Russia. The years that followed were a period of political seesawing, with Viktor Yanukovych winning the presidency in 2010. Yanukovych stalled on signing an association agreement with the European Union, opting instead for closer economic ties with Russia. For many Ukrainians, it felt like a betrayal, a step backward after years of striving for a different future. Why are there not more people talking about the year 2014 in Ukraine? In 2013, it boiled over again. Sparked by Yanukovych's U-turn on the EU agreement, hundreds of thousands took to the streets, protesting corruption and authoritarianism. The government's response was brutal. Scores were killed, their blood staining the streets. Despite the violence, they stood their ground. What's something people don't know about the annexation of Crimea? As the Euromaidan protests raged in Kiev, Vladimir Putin saw an opportunity. While the world was distracted, he moved swiftly to seize control of Crimea, a strategically important peninsula on the Black Sea with a majority Russian population. It was a textbook case of military annexation disguised as a popular uprising. Mass soldiers, later revealed to be Russian special forces, fanned out across Crimea, seizing government buildings and military bases. A hastily organized referendum, condemned as illegitimate by the international community, was held, its results predictably in favor of joining Russia. The annexation of Crimea sent shockwaves through the international community. It was a blatant violation of international law, the first time since World War II that a European country had seized the territory of another by force. The West responded with sanctions against Russia, but Putin, seemingly unfazed, had achieved his goal. Crimea was back in the Russian fold. For Ukraine, the loss of Crimea was a bitter pill to swallow. It was a painful reminder of the country's vulnerability, of the Kremlin's willingness to use force to achieve its objectives. But it also strengthened the resolve of the Ukrainian people. They had lost a part of their territory, but they had found their voice, a sense of unity and national purpose that even Putin hadn't anticipated. Why are there not more people talking about the war in eastern Ukraine between 2015 and 2017? The annexation of Crimea was just the beginning. In the spring of 2014, Russian-backed separatists, armed and supported by Moscow, launched a war in eastern Ukraine in the Donbas region. It was a conflict that had been simmering for years, fueled by historical grievances, linguistic divisions, and a healthy dose of Kremlin propaganda. The war in Donbas was a brutal, grinding affair, fought in trenches and urban centers, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians were killed, millions were displaced from their homes, becoming refugees in their own country. Despite facing a larger and better-equipped enemy, the Ukrainian military, bolstered by volunteers and a surge of national pride, put up a fierce resistance. They were fighting for their homeland, for their families, for the right to determine their own future. The war in Donbass, often overshadowed by other global crises, became a tragic stalemate, a frozen conflict that continues to this day. It is a constant reminder of the human cost of aggression, of the fragility of peace, and of the enduring strength of the Ukrainian spirit. This is gonna blow your mind. The spirit of Vyshyvanka, culture as a weapon. Ukraine's vibrant culture endures through history, suppressed, occupied, starved, yet never silenced. Like wildflowers through concrete, Ukrainian culture persists. Vyshyvankas symbolize Ukrainian identity, unique patterns passed down through generations. Today they declare pride and defiance. More than clothes and songs, it's poetry, art, and resilience. Stunning murals in Kyiv and Lviv. Creativity as a weapon against oppression. Ukrainian culture stands out, worth fighting for. I bet you didn't know Ukraine is becoming the Silicon Valley on the Dnipro. Tech, innovation, and the Ukrainian diaspora. Ukraine has quietly become a tech powerhouse. Cutting-edge software development, artificial intelligence, and a startup scene attracting global investment. Ukraine's becoming the brain basket of Europe. Programmers, engineers, and entrepreneurs making waves globally. The Ukrainian diaspora is making its mark worldwide, from tech to fashion to astrophysics. Inspiring the next generation, the future is full of possibilities. Why are there not more people talking about Ukraine's fight for freedom and its place in the world? As we stand here in 2024, Ukraine's story is still being written. The war in the East continues, a painful reminder of the fragility of peace. The scars of conflict run deep, both on the land and in the hearts of its people. But amidst the rubble, there is also hope. Hope for a future where Ukraine is free, sovereign, and secure. Hope for a future where democracy thrives and corruption is a distant memory. Ukrainians are not easily broken. They have faced down empires and dictators, endured famines and invasions, and emerged stronger. Ukraine's fight for freedom is a fight for democracy and self-determination. It's a fight that resonates far beyond Ukraine's borders. The future may be uncertain, but Ukraine will endure. Its people will rebuild, innovate, and create. The spirit of Ukraine will continue to turn towards the light, towards a brighter future.